Amerigo, how to set up and play. The first thing you'll do is set up the island tiles and frames based on the number of players. This is set up for a 2-player game, so it's a 3x3 grid with the frame pieces on the outside. If it was a 3-player game, it would be 3x4, and if it was a 4-player game, it'd be the complete 4x4. So basically you take these tiles and shuffle them up and lay them out. The only rule is you can't have any water areas completely surrounded by land, and all land areas have to be orthogonally adjacent. You can't have any diagonals, for example, like this. Islands cannot be connected that way. All island spaces have to be orthogonally adjacent. So once you've laid out all the island tiles, the tiles you didn't use can get returned to the game box. You're going to lay out these time markers. The game lasts 5 rounds, and you're going to put these in descending order, starting with round 5 and going down. And then you're going to put commodity tokens on each spot on the game board that has the corresponding symbol for the commodity tokens across the board. You'll also put black treasure chests anywhere on the island if it's a big island, meaning it has 20 spaces or more. So you can see this island connects through here and has 20 spaces, so that got a treasure chest, and the one over here is another big island with over 20 spaces, or 20 or more. It got a treasure chest too. All other islands are considered small islands. Next, you'll set up the individual player pieces. Each player will get a player board. They'll have their own village tiles in their color. They'll have 12 trading posts. They'll have 2 ships, and they'll have 5 markers. 3 of the markers go onto the tracks, so onto the progress track, onto the cannon track, and onto the goal track. The other 2 markers, one will go on the scoring track on the main board, and then one will go on to the what's called the special action track, also known as the turn order track. So you randomize this and put these down. And the disc that is on top is considered the start player. So every other player after the start player will get additional gold as a bonus. So in this example, the second player, the yellow player, will get 1 additional gold on their track. If this was more than a 2-player game, the third player would get 2 additional gold, and the fourth player would get 3 additional gold to start the game. Next, you'll shuffle all of the pirate tiles and put 5 out on the game board. 1 will not get used and just gets returned to the box, and then you'll reveal the first one to start the game. The values for these are 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Next, you'll shuffle all the progress tokens. These are the ones with the brown gear back. And you'll place 8 on the board to start, regardless of player count. Next, you'll put out the production tokens. So since this is a 2-player game, I'm only using the ones with the 2-player icon. If it was a 3 or a 4-player game, you'd add in those tile backs. And then you put out based on the number of players. So 2-player game, I've set out 6 here. If this was a 3-player game, we'd put out an additional 2, and in a 4-player game, we'd put out all the tiles. Next to the game board, we'll also put out all of the neutral landscape tiles that can be acquired through the planning action and then put on the board through the build action. And the final thing we do before we start the game is we take all of the cubes, there's 7 in each color, and we take all 49 cubes, because there's 7 different colors, and we drop them all in the cube tower. Some will remain to seed the cube tower, and the remaining ones get sorted out on their color here on the main board here, and I've already done that. So the game is played over 5 rounds, and each round has 7 phases corresponding to the color on this wheel. You always start with the blue phase. That's where the arrow is pointed, and then we'll go clockwise. We'll go to this phase, this phase, this phase, until we complete this white phase, and that will end the round and we'll do the end of round procedures. To start every round, you'll start with all the cubes that are currently in the colored section, and you're going to drop those into the tower, and that'll indicate which actions are available and how many action points are available for the selected action. So here I've dropped these out, and let me pull these out so we can see them. So these were the cubes that fell out of the cube tower on this first phase. The color with the most number of cubes, this will indicate how many action points you have to spend. So on this example, we have 4 action points, and then we have 4 actions to choose from. We can choose the blue action, the red action, the brown action, or the yellow action. Regardless of which action we choose, each one will come with 4 action points. On some phases, you might only have 1 color come out or 2 colors come out, and that will limit your choice of actions. When you're dropping the cubes into the tower, if there were any cubes that accidentally fell out, you would take those and drop those in along with all the ones that we pulled from this one. If there were no cubes to drop in for this phase, or if no cubes actually fell out of the tower, then that entire phase would get skipped. That's pretty rare, but I guess it could happen. So each player gets to choose which action to perform, and this is performed in turn order. So starting with the red player, they'll make their choice between these actions and the 4 action points to spend. And then the yellow player would get to choose 1 action until all players have chosen, and then we go to the next phase. A couple things to point out: any unspent action points are simply forfeited. So let's say they choose to use the red action and they only need to spend 3 of the 4 action points. That extra one is just forfeited. Also, you can always spend gold from your gold track to get additional action points. So if the yellow player wanted to spend the 1 gold they have on their track, they could get 5 action points in this example. And it's always 1-to-1. So if you wanted to spend 3 gold from your player board, you could get 3 additional action points. The other thing you could do, instead of taking one of the actions available from the cube drop, is you can take gold. Basically, for every 3 cubes, total cubes, not just the one in the highest color. So in this example, we have 7 total cubes. For every 3, you get a gold, and you round up, so it's in the player's favor here. So 7 cubes rounded up would give us 3 gold. Now you forfeit your action if you do that, but you could take gold instead of taking one of the selected actions. If you do decide to take gold, you simply move up. I took the 3 gold here. If you ever exceed the gold track when taking gold, for every one in excess, you simply would score a victory point immediately. Once all players have taken their action, you simply put the cubes back in their corresponding section, and you move on to the next phase. So we would drop all of the black cubes into the tower and find out which actions we have available and how many action points. So now let's go over each of the 7 actions in the game and how they work. The first action, the blue action, is called the sailing action. This allows you to move both of your ships 1 space each per action point. Now the ships have to move orthogonally adjacent on the board, and when you're first placing your ships out, they can be placed for free onto any frame piece around the board, and then subsequent moves either along the frame or into the island areas will cost 1 action point per move. So let's say we had 4 action points. This ship comes on the board for free, could go 1, 2, and anchor there. Whenever you land on one of these spots, you immediately, if this is empty, if there isn't some other player's trading post, your own, or it hasn't been covered over by a tile, you immediately put a trading post on that section. And then what this is saying is if you're the first player to put a trading post on the island, meaning you've discovered the island, you immediately score 3 victory points on the victory point track. If another player had already put a trading post on this island, you wouldn't get the discovery bonus. And keep in mind, both ships get to move the action points allotted in the round. So if we had 4 action points this round, that ship moved 1, 2. Once you land on an anchor, that immediately ends your turn for that ship. You're not allowed to move past it. And let's say their second ship comes here and goes 1, 2, 3. They'll put a trading post there. So you can have multiple trading posts on the same island. This is all connected, but since this was already discovered, this trading post would not score the 3 bonus victory points. One thing to keep in mind about movement is you can only ever have one ship on a space on the board, but other ships can pass through you. So if this ship had 4 action points, 1, 2, 3, 4, as long as it doesn't stop where another ship is. On these outer frames, you can have an unlimited number of ships. Let's say on a subsequent turn, this ship had 5 action points. They may decide to go 1, 2, 3. So they can, or even 4, and then 5. You can see these frames are divided by these white lines. Moving from one frame border to another is 1 action point. The next action is the black cube action. That's the action to load your cannons. Here you simply, if you select this, you advance your cannon track 1 space per action points. So let's say we had 3 action points in this example. You would simply advance your cannon track. Cannons are used at the end of a round to fight off the total number of pirates showing. So here, since it's round 1, we only have to fight off 2 pirates. If you ever reach the end of a track, let's say we were here and we had 2 action points to spend. Let's say we were there. So we spend 1 of them and I'm over. You instantly get 2 gold on your gold track. It does not matter how many you would have gone over. If you push the boundary of your track, you always score 2 gold and then you stay at the maximum spot. So it didn't matter if I had 5 APs. Since I've pushed it, it's just 2 gold. And this overage rule applies to your cannon track, your progress track, and also the special action track. So on these 3 tracks, if your marker would have ever been pushed over by the action points, you get the 2 gold immediately, regardless of how much you would have gone over. The next action, the red cube action, is the plan action. You can see it corresponds to this token. It allows you to take either neutral tiles and or your own personal color village tiles. The action points correspond to the number here. So you can see all of your own individual tiles cost 1 action point each to purchase. You would basically just take this and put it into your area, saying that you've taken that. You can take an unlimited number of tiles based on how many action points you have during the phase, but you can only take 1 of the neutral tiles in the center. So let's say I had 5 action points to spend and I took the red action. I could take 1 from the center, and you can see this costs 3 action points. And then I could take this one and maybe this one for the total of the 5 action points. And I just put those in front of me. The next is the brown action, or the progress action. You're simply going to advance your progress track 1 space per action point. And if you ever reach or pass one of these numbers, you immediately get to take any of the available progress tokens on the board. So let's say in this example I had 6 action points to spend and I chose the brown action. Since I passed one of the numbers, I get to immediately take any one of these tiles and place it on my board. You can see there's only room for 5 because there's only 5 numbers that you'll ever pass. And so those go right here, and we'll cover these at the end in terms of the different powers they provide throughout the game or one-time use. And then again, the same rule applies about the overage. If you ever go over the track, you'd get 2 gold. The next action, the green cube action, is the build action. This allows you to build either your own or your neutral landscape tiles that you've acquired. There is no limit to the number that you can build, but it's simply based on the action points. So if I had 5 action points, I could build all 3 of these tiles on this turn. The most important rule about building is that these tiles have to be orthogonally adjacent to one of your trading posts, or can trace a route through a trading post. So I may decide to use one action point, and since this is adjacent, this space right here, I could lay that. Any commodity tokens that I've laid over, I immediately get to keep, and I simply place those on my board. And then you're going to score points based on whether it was a small or a big island. So since we know this was a big island, you get the larger number point value. So I would immediately score 2 points on the score track and turn this over. If this was a small island, I would only get the small number, the 1 point. But since this is a big island, I get the 2 points, and I can turn that over, and then now I know I've spent one of my action points to lay that tile. With another action point, I can take this neutral tile that I had, and I could lay it as long as it's adjacent or can trace a path back to my trading post. And so here this would cost 3 action points. Since it's a big island, I would get 9 victory points immediately, and I would get to keep this commodity token. And then maybe for the final move, I've got this large tile. I've got nowhere to place it. So maybe what I would have done is probably place this, since I don't have room for it here. Once I scored the victory points, this simply gets flipped over. I could place this one next to another adjacent trading post. So since I'm adjacent here, I can place it next to that one. It costs 1 action point to place, and since it's a large island, I'm immediately going to score the larger victory point, and it covered up this tile, and I get to place that on my board. One thing that's important to remember is that the neutral tiles that get placed, like this one, this isn't in a player's color, other players can trace through here. So if a red player later placed a trading post there, and let's say they put a single one of theirs down, they could trace through this neutral, it doesn't belong to anyone once it's placed, and they could place tiles here. When I'm spending my action points, I can build on one tile or I can build on multiple tiles, as long as it's adjacent from where I have trading posts or connected tiles. You can never build over water. And you can build over these trading post spots. Let's say I decide to build that on a later turn. Then that prevents anyone from docking there and building a trading post. If there was a trading post here, I'm not allowed to build over that. So the only thing that would be available was this single spot. Let's say if red, or even me, had a trading post there. If and when all the spaces on an island are completely covered, that island will immediately score. So the player that completed the island always gets 3 victory points. And if it was a large island, they would take the treasure chest, which can immediately be turned in for 3 gold. You can keep it and turn it in for gold when you'd like. And then all players with trading posts on the island will score victory points. So let's say the red player had a trading post here from a prior turn, and let's imagine that all these island spaces were completely covered. And let's say the red player actually did the move to finally complete the island. So they would get the 3 points and the treasure chest. It doesn't matter how many trading posts they have or how many tiles. Since they were the one that completed the island, they get the island completion bonus. And then all players will score points based on how many trading posts they have on the island, multiplied by the current round marker. So in this example, red had 1 trading post So it's 1 times the round marker, so 1 times 5. They get 5 points immediately on the scoring track. The yellow player had 2 trading posts, so they get 3 times the round marker, so they'd get 15 points immediately on the scoring track. So as you can see, as the game goes down, you get fewer and fewer points for completing islands. The next action is the yellow cube action. That's the production action. This allows you to purchase these production tokens on the board. The number printed is the value required in action points to purchase it. So let's say I had 7 action points and I chose the yellow cube action. I could buy that one, and that totals 7. So you can buy as many as your action points allow, and you just take these. These will not refill until the end of the round. So once they're gone until the end of the round. And so you simply place them on your board. All players have 1 production token pre-printed on their board, and so this will add to it. And then once they're acquired, the printed value no longer has any meaning. That was just the cost to acquire it. So this will count as 3 production tokens, the 1 printed and the 2 additional. The number printed no longer matters. The final action is the white action, or the special action track. You have a choice when you take the white cube action. You can either advance your disc up to the number of action points spent on the track. So let's say we had 5 action points and we chose the white cube action. I could either go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I could go up to here. I may decide to stop short, and we'll see why in a second here. Or you can use the white cube action as an action based on where your marker currently is. So let's say the red player on a prior action used all 5 action points, and they are there. Now remember, this will immediately change turn order for the next, starting with the next phase. So on the next phase, let's say we go to the sailing action, the red player will be the first to act and make the decision. Let's say a white cube comes out. Now they can decide, do they want to advance the track? Their choice is to advance the track, the number of action points, or use the white cube as a wild card and take the action based on where their marker currently is. So they can take the white cube action and say, I'm going to use it as a green action, which is build. So the white cube action either allows you to advance your disc up to 1 space per action point, or take the action of the current spot where your disc is at. Normal overage applies, so if you ever go over the track, you'd score 2 gold. If your disc ever gets to here, you can see it counts as any of the available actions. So you could use the white cube to take any of the other 6 colored actions. Also, if another player takes the action, they decide to move up on the track and they land on the space of another player, remember they're considered to now be in first in turn order when the next phase starts. So those are all 7 actions in the game. Once we've gone phase by phase and have completed this final phase, we'll complete the end of round procedure. So the first thing we do at the end of a round is all players have to fight off the total pirates shown. Now this is the first round. Let's say this was the second round, so I've got to fight off a total of 5 pirates. So you add up all the pirate tokens showing. So this player would simply go down 5 on their cannon track. So they've successfully fought off the pirates. This player only has 1 cannon, so they have to go down as many as possible until 0. Since they weren't able to fight off all the pirates, they're going to suffer all the losses showing on the tokens. So they're going to lose 5 victory points immediately from the scoring track. So even if this player had 4 cannons and they were able to fight off 4 of the 5, it does not matter. Their track always goes down to 0 based on the fact that they lost all their cannons, and they're going to lose the total number of tokens shown. So they'd lose 5 victory points. Once all players have fought off the pirates, we'd reveal the one for the next round. Here it's 0, so next round we have to fight off 5, just like we did this prior round. Next, we're going to refresh the progress tokens. Any tokens in this right side will they'll all get discarded and they'll get removed from the game, and any remaining ones simply slide over, and then we're going to refill these 4 with 4 brand new progress tokens. And we'll just put those out there. And now those are on the board for the next round. Next, we'll discard any remaining production tokens, and we'll refill based on the player count that we did in setup. So there are the new production tokens for the next round. And the final thing we'll do is we'll discard the current round marker to indicate that we'd have 4 rounds remaining. In this example, you'll remember we assumed we were 1 round in. So let's say we were on round 4. Now we're on round 3. So 3 rounds remaining. So at the end of a round, all players fight off pirates. You reveal a new one. You discard these, slide these over, refill these, discard all the production tokens and refill based on the player count, and simply remove the on top round marker. At the end of the 5th round, if we were on the final round here, we would go immediately to endgame scoring. So you still do the normal procedure at the end of the round. You do the pirates. You obviously don't need to refill these anymore, but you've got to fight off your pirates, and then you do endgame scoring. So the first thing you'll do as part of endgame scoring is you want to convert anything that would have given you gold. So if you had a one-time marker, one-time use that gave you 3 gold, or maybe you didn't convert a treasure chest, you can turn that in. Because every gold you have on your track will give you victory points. So you take your current number of gold and you immediately add it to your victory point score. Next, you're going to get points for how far you progressed on the progress track, the special action track. So the first thing you'll look at is your progress track. So since my marker got to here, I'll score 1 additional victory point. If I got it all the way to here, I would have gotten 15 points. I'm also going to look on the special action track. Since I got past this number, that's worth 3 victory points. Again, if I was able to get to the end of the track, that would have been 15 victory points. Excess cannons at the end of the game, unfortunately, aren't worth anything. It's only your points on your progress track and your special action track, along with the gold that you scored. Next, you're going to score any victory points based on progress tokens that gave you endgame victory points. These are the ones marked with E's. And the last thing we'll do in totaling final points is to determine your production score. So basically, you're going to take all of your production tokens multiplied by the number of commodity tokens you acquired throughout the game. So I've got 1 pre-printed production token times 0, so no points there. 1 times 1 is 1, plus another 1 times 1. Here I've got 2 tokens, the pre-printed and this one, so this would be 2 times 1. And unfortunately, I have 3 production tokens here, but no commodity tokens, so 3 times 0 is 0. So you multiply the commodity times your production tokens for each of the goods and add those to your score track. So to recap, you're going to get 1 victory point for each gold you have. You're going to get points for your goods. You're going to get points for how far you made it on the progress track and the special action track. You're going to get victory points for any endgame tiles. You're going to add all those points to your current position on the score track, and most points win. If there's a tie, the tied players would look to see who's ever further ahead on turn order. Now let's take a look at the different types of progress tokens that you're going to encounter throughout the game. Alright, let's quickly go over all the different types of progress tokens in the game. All of these progress tokens work the same. Whenever you take the corresponding action, you get to add a number of action points. So in this example, if I was taking the progress or the brown cube action, I could add 2 action points to whatever was available that phase. In this example, whether I was taking the brown or the green, I always get to add one additional action point. So these add action points whenever you're taking that specific action. Here are some others that have an infinite use like these. These persist throughout the game. You're always able to treat red cubes as if they were green cubes and vice versa. You can treat green cubes as if they were red cubes. And keep in mind, this interchangeability only applies when taking an action. So if a red cube came out the tower, you could decide to use that red cube to take the build action. If you also had this, whenever you take the build action, you get an additional 2 action points. So that's a powerful combo. Here, when taking the planning or the red cube action, you're allowed to take 2 neutral landscape tiles. Normally you're limited to only taking 1. So this allows you to take 2 during that phase. Here, whenever you're able to successfully fight off the pirates, you gain an additional 2 gold. Here, if you're unable to fight off the pirates, you only lose half the number of victory points. You're still required to decrease your cannon track as many as pirates were shown. And you have to round up on the victory points lost. Here, for the remainder of the game, all other players besides you have to fight off an additional 2 pirates, in addition to what's shown on the game board. Here, for the remainder of the game, whenever you choose to take gold instead of a normal action, for every 2 cubes, you get a gold, versus the normal exchange rate of 3 per gold. Here you get to round up in the player's favor. Here, whenever you establish a trading post, you get an additional gold on the gold track. This doesn't work retroactively for any trading posts you've established in the past, but for any new trading post that you establish, for each one, you get an additional gold. Here are some tokens that have one-time use. So at any time you could flip this over and get 3 gold. Here you can get 5 gold. Here, instead of taking an action, you can use this progress token, and then for each cube, you can immediately score 1 victory point on the score track. And remember, this is for all cubes, not just your action point cubes. This token is a one-time use. Whenever the token's owner is using the white cube action, they can ignore the action points and immediately put their special action token on top of the leading player's token on that track. Whenever a player uses the blue sailing action, they can turn this over for 1 time and immediately get 8 additional action points for sailing for each of their ships. These tokens provide endgame bonuses, so this player would get an additional victory point for every trading post they have on the map board. This player would get an additional victory point for each gold on their track, and this player would just score 7 total additional victory points at endgame. Here are some special progress tokens that came in one of the promo packs. This one is a one-time use. The token's owner can take a second action at the end of a game phase. The only rule is he or she has to choose a different action than the one they performed earlier in the phase. So they can take gold with this, as long as they didn't take gold with their primary action, but it gives them a second complete action. This is a one-time use that allows the owner to immediately move up 2 spaces on all 3 tracks, the cannon track, the progress track, and the special action track. This token allows the player to completely ignore the victory point loss 1 time at the end of a game round that would have come from pirates. And with this token, they neither lose victory points or cannons. They can maintain their spot on the cannon track. Here, 1 time, the owner can choose any colored action when taking the white cube action, regardless of where their token is on the special action track. Here is a one-time use. Instead of taking an action, they can take all the number of cubes available in the phase and immediately get that amount of gold on their gold track. And this final one is an endgame bonus. The owner can use this as any production token they like at the end of the game to increase the value of their goods scoring. Finally, I want to cover quickly some of the mini expansions that came with the that you can get in addition to the game. The first one is mini expansion 1. It's the volcano. Basically, you would set this volcano tile out near the center, in the center of the map board, and then you would randomly shuffle these gold tokens that came with it and put them face down on each of the gold spaces. And then when anyone did the build action and put a tile over this, they would immediately reveal it and score that many gold on their gold track. So that's expansion 1. Expansion 2 included 2 new island tiles for either a really big island or some small islands. And also in expansion 2, it included those special progress markers that I already covered. The final mini expansion, mini expansion 3, includes these special production spaces. These are basically called 4 special production buildings. You lay them out with the normal, neutral island tiles. And so there's 4 special types that have very odd shapes. They can be acquired during the normal plan action, the red cube action, and you can take them. And then they can be built with the normal green action, the build action. The only difference is when you build them, you immediately get to take one of these special production tokens. You can take any one of your choice and immediately add it to your player board. So that should be everything you need to set up and play Amerigo.